Hey everybody, apologies, I was going to do live on YouTube, however I had some obligations come up, so I wanted to do this video really quickly, get it recorded for everybody to take a look at. We're not going to have any editing, we're just going to kind of do this live, so we're going to see how this goes. Hopefully I can do this in under 30 minutes. What you're looking at right now is the challenge itself. In the challenge, we had to calculate the reorder rate for every customer, if it was reorder rate, if it was within 90 days or over 90 days, and then add those values up and get the overall reorder rate. That's what we're going for. Is this percentage is actually the hardest bit to get to, but we're going to work backwards, starting with this calendar, figuring out the individual dots. So we'll first figure out the first order, and then from there, each of these diamonds will figure out the reorders, whether they're within 90 days, and then calculate the percentage for each customer. And then after that, we'll come back and recreate these KPIs. So I'm just going to create a new sheet, and we're going to start by taking order date, and we're going to drag that out on our view. And I apparently also dragged customer name, and I'm just going to, that's fine. I'm just going to also change this to exact date. And we're going to ultimately sort this by the total orders for customers. So I'm just going to right click, and I'm going to choose, let's try this again. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose sort on customer name, and I'm going to choose a field. And we're going to do order ID, and we're going to do count distinct. And that's one order, ascending, descending. So that's what we want to start with. And then we're going to add in our label. So let's get our first label in here of total orders. I'm just going to create a new calculated field, and I'm going to call it total orders, and I'm going to add a space because I already have created some of these fields over. So I'm just going to, for me, I'm adding a space after all of them just for the sake so that we can do this. We're just going to use a fixed statement, and I'm going to go by customer name, and I'm going to say count distinct of order ID. And I'm going to take this calculation, and I'm going to throw it over here on rows, and I'm going to change it to a dimension, and I'm going to change it to discrete, and that's going to give me my first label. Of course, I would want to right align this. I'm not going to worry too much about the formatting. I want to get the major components on here, but again, not going to worry too much about it. The next calculation I want to do is I want to indicate when it's a first order by a customer. So I'm just going to create a new calculated field, call it first order, and I'm just going to say first calculation, which is going to say count the number of spots it is from the first value. And if it's the first value, it'll be equal to 0. I've got a first order calculation, so I'm going to put a little space in there, and OK. Let's just now take this value and we'll bring it out on our view. And I'm going to change my mark type now to shape and drag first order on to shape. And it's already working. That's great. I just want to make sure that we always choose the right setup here on first order. We're going to choose specific dimensions, and we're going to really say, oh, I'm missing something on my view. I actually also need to add order date out on here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to check everything but customer name. So this is going to be for every customer, show me the first order. Otherwise, give me all the other values. And now I can just change my mark type. My true is going to be that right pointing arrow. And then false is the diamond. And I'll hit OK. And there we go. So looking good so far. My next little bit here is then to say, was the order within 90 days? Well, I have to calculate the number of days between an order. So what is my calculation going to be here? Well, we're going to days since last order. And we're just going to say, we're going to use lookup. And we're going to say min, because the lookup function needs to use an aggregate of order date. And we're going to look up 0 values. It's going to basically look back at itself. And then we're going to subtract lookup min order date -1. And this is going to look back one order. And again, I have to use min here because we have to use an aggregate, but it's just going to look on date here and return date values. I've already got this calculation. Just going to add a space after it, hit OK. And I'm going to bring it out onto detail so you can see that, well, it's not returning anything quite yet. And that's because we need to change our aggregations in here. Once again, we want to choose specific dimensions. We want to choose all the values but customer name. So for every customer name, it's going to reset. So our first value should have no values, and then their next will show the days from the first to the second to third, third to fourth, and so on and so on. And now we can use that calculation to say if it's within 90 days or not. So I'm just going to call this within 90 days question mark, and I'm going to say if days since last order. And again, I have mine a space in mine. If it's less than or equal to 90, then give me a 1, else give me a 0. And that's going to be my days within 90 calculation. And now if I look at this calculation, I can just bring this out onto color, and I'm going to change it to a discrete value. You'll notice that when I'm within 90 days, so over here in the middle, I'm one color, and then when I'm more than 90 days, I am blue. And I'm just going to kind of match. I'm not going to do perfect for what I had. Gray, and then the default purple here. And that is looking really good so far for this visualization. Let's create those lines. So the next little bit here, actually, there's some tooltips that we ultimately need to create, and it's when we're over one of the purple dots, we need to have a label in here that's going to say it's within 90. And if it's not within 90. So I'm just going to create a new calculated field here. And I'm just going to call this hit label. And we're just going to say if, what do we call that? Calculation within 90 days is equal to 1. Then we're going to just give it a label of within 90 and end. So this is our first of two labels. I've already called something that, so I'm going to add a little space. We're going to bring this out and add it on to text here, onto detail. And we need to just edit this calculation. Once again, we're going to be doing a lot of this, so let's get comfortable in doing that. Our hit label actually looks correct. Oh, you know what? It's totally fine. It's only showing up when we're hitting those values, and that's what we would expect. Let's duplicate that calculation. Right click, duplicate, and we're going to create a calculation that is a miss outside the 90-day period. So outside 90 label. And all we have to do is just change this to 0 and say outside. So it's beyond 90 days. And I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to take that label and also add that on my tooltip. And you'll notice that it shows up just fine the way that we would expect it. Everything's operating great. Now let's duplicate this mark, and we're going to create those lines. Those lines are actually just a Gantt bar chart. So I'm duplicate that, and then I'm on the second mark type. I'm going to change my shape to a Gantt bar. And you'll see I've got my marks showing up here. I just got to figure out how to calculate that distance between here, those values. And we kind of know the values already. What we want to do is we're just going to take that same calculation that we used to, what was it for? It was for the days since the last order. So maybe if I just cheat a little bit here, what if I did negative days since last order? And I drop this out of my view, and I'm just going to check to see what my tooltip says on here. Let's just edit this calculation and make sure we are choosing everything but customer name once again. And then if I drag this on size, hey, I think this is gonna work. Let's just set the size here down to as small as we can do it. And then we'll just do a dual axis. What I did is basically made that mark go backwards in time rather than forward. And I'm just going to go dual axis, and let's synchronize these axes. Looking pretty good. I think we just got to change the orders of these, and we are set. You know, it's definitely doing the trick exactly how we would have expected it. Maybe I'll just change this opacity down a little bit on the line on the Gantt bar, so it's not so intense. But more or less, we're getting what we're looking for. The next part, the next tricky bit here, is that we need to just now calculate that percentage. How are we going to get that percentage? Let's give it a shot. So I'm just going to say, what we know is we want to say if first is not equal to 0, and days since last order is less than or equal to 90, then we want to return that value, and that's pretty good. That's going to return else, and this is going to return our total orders within the correct time period. Let's say first with the correct parentheses. And there we have it. And now I'm just going to, this is sort of that top level value. We are going to want to do a sum of this, I'm going to guess. Let's see if it'll let us do that. I've got an error. Cannot sum an aggregate already. But you know what we can do is we can do a window sum. So we're going to do a window sum of all of these values from the last order. And then we're going to divide this eventually. Let's just get this first part done. So this is just going to be percent. This is eventually going to become our percent within 90. I'm going to just hit apply here. And let's bring this out on our view so we can see it in action. I'm going to change it to discrete value. And of course, we're going to always need to edit that table calculation. And I'm just going to choose, once again, for that customer name. So for every customer name, let's get those values in. Perfect. We're getting the actual number we're looking for. Now we just need to calculate the number of orders in general for any calculation. Well, we have that. It's total orders and -1. So we could actually just take here, I think, and I'm just going to put this in an aggregate. I'm going to use min total orders. And I'm going to say -1. And if I hit apply, hey, we got the percentages we're actually looking for. These are the correct percentages. I hadn't done it this way, and it looks like it worked perfectly. So we've got another calculation done. I would just need to format this. So let's, I guess I'll just do some quick formatting so that I can prove that it works exactly how we anticipated. So there's our percentages. Let's try that again. There are our percentages, total orders, and the percent within 90. I think the order is a little bit different here, but more or less, if we take a look, we're getting exactly what we're looking for. Emily Fan, 75% on 17 orders. Cloris Kasten Smid, 42% on 13 orders. And that's exactly what we're getting. So we've nailed this chart. Let's just check to see how we're doing with time. Oh, we got that done in 14 minutes, almost to the dot. Now we just have the KPIs. These are a beast. So we're going to do 2 KPIs, and I'm going to use my favorite trick, min 0.0. I'm going to duplicate it. This is going to allow me to create 2 separate calculations on 2 different marks cards. And the first one that we're going to do, let's actually just do the hard one right away. And what we're going to do is we're kind of break this component up. If we take a look at what we're doing, we need to get first the total number of orders that the hit rate was correct. And then we're just going to divide that by the total orders for all customers -1 for each customer. So let's do a calculation for the numerator, another one for the denominator, and then we should be good to go. So for our numerator, I'm just going to call this percent of reorders numerator. I'm just going to say, let's do the, I think we can actually just use the calculation we already had sort of created earlier, or at least part of it. We kind of said if first is equal to not equal to 0 and days since last order is less than or equal to 90, then 1, else 0, end. And we're going to make this once again, if I can type, a window sum. There we have it, a window sum of the value. I'm going to hit OK on here. I'm going to bring this value out onto my marks card. You're going to see it's not going to give me what I anticipate. It gives me a 0. On this marks card, I need to make sure I include order date, and make sure that I choose it at the exact date. I'm going to choose order ID, and I'm going to choose customer name, bringing out all those values. So I'm going to have, if you take a look at this, I have 5,010 marks on my view. That's a lot of marks. I kind of said as part of the expectation is I only want to see one mark on my view. We're going to get to that pretty quickly, actually. But first we want to get this calculation showing exactly what we're hoping for. So I'm just going to edit our table calculation, and our reorder, remember, is always just going to be everything checked but customer name. And then in this case, we're going to choose all the values. So this is going to go across all the data set. And I'm going to change my mark type to text. You can see it's just repeating that same value. This is the number of correct orders within 90 days, 1,628. And now if we were doing this right, that reorder numerator, we just need to divide this by total orders. And we're going to use an LOD here just to make this fast. I'm going to say min of fixed, and we're going to fix this. Actually, we don't need to fix it. We can just say count distinct order ID, and this is going to give us the total number of orders. And then we're going to subtract this by count distinct of customer name. So that's just subtracting 1 per customer for all the orders. So it's removing the first order from the count. And then this reorder becomes the percent of reorders. And if we did this right, if I hit apply, it breaks. Why is it broken? Expected closing parentheses in here somewhere. So count distinct looks good. Oh, I didn't make a bracket around this. So I need 2 LODs, 1 for customer name, 1 for order ID. Now if I hit apply, I've got my 39% that I'm looking for. My one issue here is I've got too many marks showing up on my view. And there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say if first is equal to 0, then we're going to return all of these values. I'm actually building my filter. I could put first equals 0 out on filters. It would work too. But here I'm just going to build it into my calculation. And then when I hit apply, I'm down to a single label. I still have 5,010 marks. So that's one option for this. Like I said, the other option, if I'm just going to Control Z this, if I just say first equals 0 here, I just wrote an ad hoc calculation. If I bring it up on my view, I'm going to choose true, hit OK. It's still showing all those values, but if I go and I edit my table calculation, I can just apply this in the same way that I did before. And let's try that again. I can choose true, hit OK, and I've still got some values showing up, and that's probably because I wanted to select everything. And now, once again, going to go back in here, uncheck false. There we go. I've actually got 2 marks showing up, 1 for this marks card and 1 for the other marks card. And because I'm filtering and choosing only a single value here, one value, I need to use an LOD here to get this value out. Because if I did some sort of aggregation, it just wouldn't show up. And my last calculation is actually very similar to my denominator that I just had. It's the total orders, reorders per customer. So we already know that if I use count distinct of order ID, and this is going to give me total orders, and if I subtracted this from count distinct of customer name, this would then give me the total number of reorders, and then I can just take this and copy the portion with customer name here and paste that in here. I didn't really need the parentheses, but I'll just say orders per customer. And when I do this, I can now just drag this value right onto label, and you'll notice 5.7, that matches. If we're looking at what's left, I just need to do some formatting on my mark to get it right. But I have all the components there. And in fact, I have the components here for the tooltips. Let's just make that tooltip to make sure that we've knocked it out of the park. Remember, we have that hit label, and then we have the outside 90 label. So we're just going to go in here and remove our tooltips altogether. And then I believe on the bars, we're just showing order date. I'm going to hit OK. And then for my other tooltip here, I'm just going to center this up, and then I'm going to insert 3 values. I'm going to insert order date, and then on the next line, I'm going to insert hit label, and then I'm going to insert next to it with outside label. And then for my hit label here, all I did was color this purple. So let's just do that. And I'm going to uncheck command buttons. Don't get me started on command buttons. Looks great. This is it. A little bit of formatting, and we'd be there. I don't want to spend extra time creating a video where you're watching me format. This video, just over 22 minutes to create the solution. Actually, let's put this on a dashboard really quickly. So I'm just going to drag sheet 8 out here, and then sheet 7 to show, hey, it's possible to do this pretty quickly once you learn a few techniques. So I think the big piece of all this is that to create these KPIs, we had to layer table calculations on top of table calculations. We had like 3-4 levels of table calculations in order to get to this KPI. And I've run across this so many times that it's no surprise that it was eventually going to be a Workout Wednesday. I think I've done this exact solution in some form 4 or 5 times in the last 3 months for work. So that's it. Thank you if you watched all this video. Hopefully you've learned a few things in order to build out these KPIs that are using using table calculations. Thanks again.